Hello everyone, welcome back to Call of Duty DFS Slate Breakdown for July the 10th. We have a small 3-gamer here, nothing too crazy I don't think, but we'll talk about it either way. I'm sure as you guys can maybe hear a little, my throat and nose are still pretty bad from just being a little sick at the moment, so this is not going to be a full-length, full detail video. I'm going to try to keep it pretty short, that way I can kind of save myself a little bit of my voice here. Off the bat, honestly, not too intriguing of a slate. If we look at the odds, we have three pretty decent favorites. And I really have a hard time finding an underdog that I would like to endorse here. Um, I'm honestly going to keep it pretty simple. Like I feel like when we look at the matches, we have London versus LAG. Obviously, London have been playing pretty stellar as of late. I believe they're 4-0. Yep, they're 4-0. They're a team that, is doing pretty strong. They have pretty good wins as well. I mean, Toronto, Minnesota, Atlanta, Florida, I don't think those are necessarily all great teams. Obviously, FaZe is probably top 2. Toronto maybe top 5. Minnesota maybe top 5. There's, cases for those. Florida is not a great win, but I mean they've won all of them. The small caveat here is that London have yet to let's see if we look London and then let's see, they're playing LAG. London have yet to win a control yet, and that's definitely problematic for DFS aspect at least, because that is one of the 3 maps that they are like one of the 3 respawn game mode maps that you play. You play a hard point, search and destroy, control, then a hard point again. So winning those respawn game modes, specifically the 2 hard points and that 1 control, make up a large majority of your DraftKings score. So them losing the controls consistently does hurt them. I just think they're a good bit better than LAG here. LAG's been pretty inconsistent. Obviously, they beat FaZe, but they've lost to Toronto, New York themselves. This one you could argue is maybe a little bit closer than the odds suggest. If we look at kind of who they've played so far, I mean, they've played New York, Toronto, Boston, and FaZe. They've only won one. It is against FaZe. I mean, losing to Toronto in 5 isn't that bad. Losing to New York isn't that bad. They're a pretty strong online team as well. Losing to Boston is not ideal. Again, I don't rate Boston very highly, so you could argue that maybe LAG have had a little bit of a tough schedule, and this series is a little bit closer than it looks. I'm just personally not going to make that case. I like London. I like them to win these respawn game modes, win the search and destroys, have a pretty decent day overall, and I like a little bit of London. The problem is they are pretty expensive, and they also don't play Bocage. So we know that they ban Bocage. I don't know what LAG will turn around and ban. They usually ban Bocage or Gavutu, but it's not like London's Gavutu is necessarily scary. So I could definitely see LAG taking out either the Berlin or the Tuscan. Probably the Tuscan. They're 0-2 on it. London is 4-0 on it. So you could make a case that LAG will go ahead and ban the Tuscan. But either way, the Bocage is probably going to be banned. Or I think it will be banned almost assuredly, because that's what London banned, is the Bocage. And then for LAG, it's a toss-up between, I think, either Gavutu or Tuscan. And if they ban out the Tuscan, then we're looking at Berlin Gavutu, which is probably the worst possible maps that you could get. So I'm not going to leave London out of my player pool. However, just considering that they're expensive, the Bocage is most likely going to be banned. My exposure to them is going to be pretty limited. I think at most I'm going to have like 1 or 2 of them in my lineups, and that'll be it. Up next is Toronto versus Optic, Texas. Honestly, at first glance of these odds, I'm a little surprised by how close they are. I think this is pretty standing bias here. Obviously, Optic have not been looking the best these qualifiers. They obviously dropped a map to Paris. They dropped the series to Minnesota and New York. I believe the match against Boston, they had Prolu in. Trying to remember. Prolu was in the first week, so he played against Minnesota and Boston. Then Illy came back and then played against Paris and New York. I just think that although Optic again have not been playing well, I don't think Toronto have been playing that good either. I think this could be a pretty close series. I mean, I kind of get the odds, but I feel like overall Toronto have not been that great, and I think the upside is just much higher with Optic. We obviously know that their players are incredibly good, and I just find it hard to believe that the players like Shotzi and Scump are going to underperform for that long. I think they played. I feel like they've had a good amount of like a little break here. I mean, I'm sure that they've been practicing and stuff. It hasn't probably been like a vacation for them at all, but I don't remember when they last played, but I think they've had like 7 or 8 days since the last time they played. They've obviously had the last 2 days off, and then there's like the few days where during the week where the league is off. So I just think that they've had like a small 7-8 day little refresher. They have the full roster back, I believe, with Shotzi, Dashi, Scump, and Illy. I think this is going to be a nice bounce back spot for them to solidify themselves as one of those top 2, top 3 teams. And I think this is a pretty good make right spot for them. I think they probably win this 3-1, maybe 3-0. I just like Optic a good bit here. And again, they are the favorite. It's not a great feeling. They're also very, very expensive. Dashi and Shotzi are both around the 10K mark. It's hard to get them into your lineups. I just think overall Toronto's the big problem here is that Toronto's SMGs have been playing very poorly. They actually looked a little decent against Boston, but I think this is quite a step up in competition. I expect Optic to really, slam down and make a pretty significant victory here. So I like getting in a lot of Optic. We'll talk about the players. We'll pull up the player stats towards the end of the video, but we know Dashi's been playing extremely well. He's probably like on a tier of his own almost. He's very, very elite. I think Shotzi may be a little bit squeezed out because he has been playing pretty poorly lately. His numbers are not that great. And he is super expensive. I think he might be like the one left out. And I think this is a pretty good spot to get back onto him. Similar to how we talked about maybe looking to get back on Sib, who is a player that we know is very good. However, he's just been in a little bit of a slump. And he ended up coming back and performing very well a couple series ago for Seattle. I forgot against who, maybe Minnesota, maybe. I'm not sure, but I think this is a pretty similar spot to where you can try to get up to Dashi and Shotzi. Obviously, it's very expensive. It's a hard build to make work, but if we find some value, I like getting up to Shotzi being a little bit different that way. I can't imagine a lot of people will be on him. But either way, he's definitely going to be somebody I try to get in my player pool to be a little bit different. And I think that's possible with somebody like Illy at 64. I think he's a little underpriced. He actually came back and looked pretty good, I think, in the first 2 couple series back. Granted, one was against Paris, and then the other one was a loss to New York. So not a ton to go off of, really, with Illy being back. But either way, I'm fine with going with pretty much everybody from Optic. I think Dashi's the clear number 1. Illy's a pretty good salary saver. Scump is decent there in the middle, but I feel like that's a little risky. I think he's a little too expensive for my blood. And I think Shotzi is a nice pay up to be different option. I can't imagine people will want to try to get him into their lineups when he is 9,800. If you want to play him with Dashi, you're looking at an average of 10K. It's just a little tough to get there. So I think for that reason, you can mix and match and that kind of stuff. But I like... I would prioritize them Dashi, Shotzi, maybe Dashi, Illy, Dashi, and then probably a second little tier between Shotzi and Illy. Just depends on what you want or need. If you need the salary savings, if you need, the less ownership, you can choose between Shotzi and Illy. But and then Scump is kind of, I think, the one I would personally leave out at 8,400. And the final series up is New York Subliners versus the LA Thieves. Sorry. Before we move on, I want to talk map set, actually. I'm honestly pretty unsure what to do with the map set here. I feel pretty confident from the Optic side. I feel like they... Actually, Optic kind of banned a kind of wildly across the board. I would expect Optic to go ahead and probably look to take out the Berlin. Um, I think that would make the most sense. I don't think that they're scared of Toronto on Gavutu, given that they're 0-3 on it. I don't think Toronto's looked great on that Gavutu. Um, who knows? Like sometimes I feel like I make these looks, and I don't know if the teams are like looking at this though. That's the problem. Is I don't know if Optic will look and see Toronto's 0-3 on Gavutu as of late. Like it's not looking good for them, but um, I don't know. Just kind of have to speculate really. I think Optic will most likely go ahead and ban the Berlin. Um, then the problem with Toronto coming back is I don't know what they want to ban. Um, they could go ahead and ban the Gavutu themselves because they are 0-3 on it. Um, they've yet to play the Bocage, and Optic are 1-3 on it. So maybe Toronto will look at that and say they can maybe beat Optic on Bocage. I'm not sure. It's kind of up in the air. The Bocage possibility is there. I don't think neither team like bans it often, and that's the kind of like caveat there. The thing is that Toronto either banned the Gavutu or the Bocage. I would think they would probably go ahead and just ban the Gavutu. And I think that's a pretty good idea. Toronto, go ahead, ban the Gavutu, something that you've been losing on, But again, they've yet to play the Bocage, so maybe they're trying to ban it out, and Optic are good on it. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you could look at it. I think most likely the way I'm leaning and the way I feel is Toronto will ban the Gavutu. Optic will go ahead and ban, probably just take out the Berlin because it's a map they don't play very much. They typically like to ban it themselves. So I think we have a pretty strong map upside here. I think maybe if we do get that Bocage Tuscan, you could probably look to get a little bit more of those Optic SMGs in, specifically targeting the Shotzi and Scump. I think that could open up a Scump's upside a little bit more. We'll look at that lost full player map scores. Whoops. Lostfull.gg player map scores. I mean, I feel like that's what I'm looking for. Player scores per map. Player map stats. There we go. So if we look and try to look and see who from Optic has been doing well on the Bocage hardpoint, we'll look and see Shotzi averaging a 34 and 31, so pretty solid numbers. You definitely take that from Shotzi. Dashi 31 and 26, very, very strong numbers from him. Illy 27 and 31, not ideal. Scump 32 and 32, so a little bit hit or miss, but that's a lot of action. And that, I know, at the end of the day, if he went 32 and 32, you'd have 32 DraftKings points, which I think is a pretty solid map. So, those are the options. But we'll talk players at the end again. But I think Bocage has a chance. I'm a little unsure on the maps. New York versus LA Thieves. This is the final series. The thing here is, again, Bocage pretty decent chance, or pretty Bocage pretty unlikely here. We know that's the map LA Thieves ban all the time, and New York like to get to the Bocage. They will not be allowed to do so here because that is LA Thieves permaban. So we will be seeing the Bocage being vetoed by New York, and then I think New York will probably go ahead and just take out the Gavutu. That's the map LA Thieves are probably the most comfortable on. And I don't think New York is necessarily loving that, going there with their ARs. I would, if I was New York, I would definitely try to ban that Gavutu hardpoint. So we end up on the Berlin and Tuscan, which I think is still a pretty decent map set there for the New York subliners, hardpoint wise. 3-0 on the Berlin, 1-1 on the Tuscan, but LA Thieves are 1-2 on the Tuscan. I would much favor New York on that Tuscan versus LA Thieves for sure. So I'm leaning towards New York. They are 3-1 in all of their series so far. They're just a much better team online for whatever reason. They beat Seattle, they beat Optic, they beat LAG in Florida, so not the craziest of wins, but I mean, Texas and Seattle are pretty decent teams in their own right. LAG and Florida are kind of middling, but it's not like they've had a Paris free win or anything like that. Their wins are they're not nothing, and they're definitely pretty good online. Specifically, their hard points. There is some slight concern here again with the control, but I believe each team bans a control map, and LA Thieves I think typically ban. Actually, it says here that they ban the Gavutu. The Tuscan control, so they look to either go to the Berlin or the Gavutu. New York kind of ban across the board, so maybe they'll probably ban the Gavutu control. We go to a Berlin control. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the control picks and bans are, because I'm not sure about these numbers. I find it hard to believe that LA Thieves ban Tuscan control all the time. They've never banned Berlin control, but they've not played it yet. I find that a little hard to believe, so I'm not sure. So I don't want to try to predict hard or control that much. Control numbers are pretty stable. I don't think there's a huge difference in control maps. It's not like there's pretty outlier stuff. Maybe Gavutu's a little bit worse than Berlin and Tuscan, but either way, that's not too much of a make or break for me. So overall, I'm going to go with New York. The control definitely does worry me, but I think their hardpoint, game has been pretty solid lately. I expect them to look to get the series 3-1 as well. I could see them dropping pretty much one of anything. Maybe the control, I'm not sure. I just think they're a good bit better. They're very good online. They've been winning a lot. LA Thieves have been wildly inconsistent. They beat Paris. They beat a Boston team that's pretty hit or miss. They did lose to FaZe 3-2. I mean, they ended up losing to Florida 3-2 as well. It's very hard to get a read on LA. They seem pretty inconsistent. Pricing wise, I think LA is pretty underpriced, so you could definitely make an argument to go to the LA side as a cheap pivot. Specifically, obviously, the players we've been targeting have been Octane and Draza. Octane at 7.6 and Draza at 6.2. Those are very compelling price tags, especially when you look at the other side. Hydra at 10K. Paul X is actually fairly affordable at 8.6. I think if it wasn't for the map set being the way it is, I would be a little bit more willing to take the underdog shot with LA. I just have a hard time seeing them out maneuvering New York on Berlin and Tuscan specifically. I just feel like those are still pretty good maps for New York, although the Tuscan they're 1-1 on it. It's not like the greatest thing, but if we expand these numbers a little bit further, we could see LA Thieves 1-3 on the Tuscan. New York is 3-2 on it, so nothing crazy. But the Berlin, they're 6-1. LA Thieves is only 1-1. So overall, I'm very fine with going to New York here. I like their players. There's not much value here. It's very tough to try to build these lineups. But maybe it is what it is. Maybe you can try and justify, or we'll look at the players now. But I think you could justify playing something like Paul X and Octane, or maybe Draza and Paul, or something like that, just because LA Thieves are, in my opinion, pretty underpriced, and it's going to be a slate lacking value, I think, in all honesty. But we'll go ahead and look at the players and get out of here as we typically do. So I'm going to set it to just Major 4. We've had 4 matches the past couple of weeks. So this is a good indicator, I think, of current form. We're going to look London, Texas, and then we'll throw New York and LA in here just to get a look. So obviously Dashy up there, Paul is up there. He's been having a great time. Zero is up there, Hydra. So if we're to look at those guys, Dashy, Hydra, Paul. Oh, Hydra's the one I'm missing. So Obviously, the value's a little bit more apparent there for somebody like Zero and Paul as opposed to Dashi and Hydra, but I think those two players are just incredible in their own right. But we see Octane up here at 1.08, a very strong number. He's super cheap again at 7.6, so you could justify getting that in. We see Illy's been playing pretty well out of 1.06. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways you could go. I kind of want to look team by team. That way we can just get a decent idea of it. So if we go to London, it's been Zero, and then it's been kind of the hot hand after him. We saw it yesterday where it was, I believe, Gizmo and Afro playing very well. So you could go anywhere on London. I think Zero and Afro were probably the two I would go to. I think Afro's upside is a lot higher. He's the cheapest one. I'd be fine with either of those two. I think it's hard to justify paying Gizmo or Nasty's price tag when we think about Bocage probably banned, and the numbers are just pretty inconsistent. But then again, I think if you are a big multi-lineup guy, I think sprinkling in Nasty and Gizmo can make a lot of sense. They're probably going to be pretty low owned because of that price tag and all the reasons I just mentioned not to play them. A lot of other people have a similar idea, so you could sprinkle them in at a fairly low ownership, and I do think that they have potential, as we've seen so far with them. Up next is the Optic Texas side. Again, this one's a little tough because they did swap out, or they did bring back Illy in for Pro Loot. So it's a little bit hard to tell. The numbers, it's only 2 series that Illy's been playing, and he's at a 1.06. But again, it's Dashi, and then it's kind of everyone else, and it's a little bit hard to gauge everything here. Obviously, Dashi stands out above everyone, but we know the upside with Shotzi. He's had incredible individual performances in the past. We know Scump has upside. And again, the big thing that we have to look at with this slate and the overall overarching theme here is London permaban Bocage, LA Thieves permaban Bocage. So it's very, very unlikely that Bocage is in either of those 2 series. It can happen in Toronto, Texas. It's not, I'm unsure. It's probably a 50-50 where Toronto will go ahead and ban. But if there was a Bocage happening today, it would be in this Toronto versus Texas one, and I think if that were to happen, you would probably want a good chunk of Texas. On the other hand, if you did want to look at somebody like Insight as a cheap guy, his numbers have been pretty crazy. He's been playing very, very well as of late. Especially yesterday, he did very well again. He's only 8,200. You could definitely justify that price tag, and I should probably mention Kleenex. If there is the Bocage, he is only 6,800. He's just been playing really bad lately, but we know when Kleenex hits and when Kleenex is on fire, it's a different animal. It really is a different beast. And he actually did start picking it up yesterday. If we do look for Toronto here, Insight was obviously very, very strong, but Kleenex actually was there. Bance was actually there as well. We could be seeing a little bit of a resurgence here from Toronto. But I don't know. That's a little tough. I'm honestly kind of talking myself into Toronto here, which is concerning because my initial thought was these odds seem a little odd. I don't know, man. I really don't. I don't know. This one's a little interesting, actually. I'm kind of second guessing myself on this one, which is probably not good. You know what? I'll just pull the trigger and just go ahead and pivot here. I'm actually going to change my mind and go with Toronto. Obviously, this is a pretty tentative thing to say, just because of the things I just talked about. I talked about why I liked Optic, or just not too long ago. So obviously, pretty tentative pick here, but I just feel like overall, if we look at Texas like in this split so far, obviously again I mentioned that they do have like the week off here. They last played last Sunday and it's now next Sunday, so they've had a good amount of time to maybe fix some of these things. And the concern is definitely there that Texas come out and look very strong. I I just think like if you look at it this way, the only team that they've beaten so far has been Paris. Like they lost to Minnesota, Boston, and New York. They've only beaten Paris, and even then, this was not that convincing of a series. Um, so if they continue that trend, I could definitely see Toronto taking this one. I mean, granted, Toronto have not been looking great either. Their only win is over LAG. They've lost to London FaZe, who I think are two very strong teams anyway, but they also lost to Boston as well. So I just think overall this is pretty close. I think Toronto is very cheap, and I think for a slate lacking value, you could maybe have a very unowned Toronto. My main two targets would be Insight, then Kleenex, then maybe Cammy. But this is pretty much a very big flyer. Like if we looked at the player map stats here again, I should just keep this open at this point. But if we looked at Bocage and we did Kleenex, like he's a 34, he's a 35 and 35 player, but his upside here is insane. He's at a 47 here, 37s. Like he's averaging 35 kills a map. Like if he has a good map, like a 47 and 38 here is absolutely insane. I mean, he hasn't been playing great lately, but we know when he hits hard. At 47 kills here, like he's nearly averaging 35 kills a map here, and that's an insane number. So I think I'm willing to take the shot there. I mean, it's a little crazy. Kemi's at 31 and 31. Inside is at 27 and 27. That's not the best here. I wonder what Bance is at. 30 and 33. Yeah, his is probably a little bit too bad. I think Bance has just been playing a little too poorly to justify, but it would be Insight and Kleenex, then maybe Cammy if you do want to get a third man in, which I do think is viable in a series where Bocage is possible. So yeah, I think overall that'll be it. I think that will unlock the ability to get a little bit New York and a little bit of London in there. I think this overall will be a little bit more of an upside build, where you try to get some of these more elite players like Paul, like Zero, like Hydra, into your lineups. Mix in some Kleenex, although his numbers again are very, very bad. This is just more of a lottery ticket type play in Kleenex. Just because we know when he gets hot, he is unstoppable. He just does not get hot that often. So it's a tough one. I think maybe this is one where Toronto try to bring it. Who knows? Like this is a risky one. I could definitely wake up, or I could not wake up. I'll be awake before 1 p.m. hopefully. But this is one where if you were to go to breaking point and check the scores and you saw Optic won 3-0 or 3-1, you wouldn't be surprised. So I'm definitely very concerned there. However, I feel like Toronto is going to be a little bit under-owned, maybe where they should be. And I feel like Texas are always very owned. I feel like Illy and Scump and Dashy are going to all be like 30, 40% or something. So I'll take this underdog shot there. I'll pair them up with New York. I'll go Toronto, New York, and London. That'll be my official final picks here. Again, the players I like to target are Paul, Zero, Hydra, Insight, maybe some Afro. Kismet's probably a little too expensive. Again, maybe you could look to mix in some players like Gizmo or Nasty. Their numbers are not bad, and they do have some upside. We've seen it from them for sure. But again, I wouldn't go too crazy on that series. Maybe Cammy would be your third man in. So I think everybody's pretty much viable here. The only couple people who I'm very I would not want to play is Crimsix and Bance. I think everybody else has a logical reason behind it. I mean, we have seen some upside from Crimsix, so he does have some good maps, but I feel like him putting it together for a series is pretty unlikely at this point. And we know Kleenex is just a lottery ticket play. I would probably not have a lot of Kleenex exposure if you are going to, kind of tail me on that one. So, my throw-in nose are kind of full of mucus at this point, so I'm going ahead and go and call it here. I will be back next week for LAN time. Should be a pretty interesting one. Major 4 coming up. Major 4 championship coming up. Very, very important LAN. These teams need these CDL points. If we go look at the... look at qualifiers and we go to standings. So these teams need these points. So if we go to the go to the championship, we could see how many CDL points you're getting for these placements. These teams need to be top 8. Top 8 is the cutoff. Only top 8 go to the championship. The rest of them go home. So we know New York need a good performance. We know Florida, Minnesota, LAG, LAT, Toronto. All these teams are in the hunt, or like in the mix here. The only teams that are pretty safe, I think, obviously are Optic, Texas, and Atlanta FaZe. You could probably argue London and Seattle are probably safe as well. But all the way from Boston down to New York, all these teams are needing good performances. So that's something to keep in mind. And I like New York here. I like Toronto. I like New York, and I like London. Obviously, Bocage watch. Toronto versus Texas, I think, is a possibility. I think maybe it is worth mentioning that it is worth. I think it could definitely be worth trying to put a little bit together of a game stack. I think this is specifically something. This is maybe a little bit more of a cash game, single entry style build. I'm not sure how to utilize it yet. Maybe this will take some experimenting on. But I think when we have a through gamer like this, where there's pretty much guaranteed no bocage in the first and third series, I think you could definitely argue stacking up game 2 with Toronto and Texas, having a close, long bocage match where a lot of these players are putting up a lot of kills and a lot of scoring is overall happening. I think it's a pretty good opportunity to go ahead and stack up this series. Like, 5-man stacking is probably pretty crazy. Maybe 4. I think you could definitely argue that having like a 2-2 from each side, like if you did want to go Inside Kleenex, Dashy Illy, or something like that, I think you could argue that that's actually a pretty decent build. Like, we could definitely see those 4 players all being in like the top 10 of scoring or something like that, just because we have a bocage, potentially a pretty close series, that kind of stuff. I could definitely see it happening. So I'm going to mention that. I'm going to make some builds like that. Maybe it's lighting money on fire. I'm not sure, but that's just something to keep in mind. We know bocage scores so much. London, LAG, there's no bocage. New York, LA Thieves, no bocage. So if Toronto and Optic get a really strong map set, we could be kind of laughing in the money as we have a bunch of the game stack here, which is a very, very unpopular build, with good reason, because it usually is like kind of negative EV, negative value to do so. But either way, you guys, it's a lottery ticket play. Keep that in mind. It's a pretty risky thing to do. For sure, but I think it's worth mentioning just because of how the game and how the DraftKings scoring and how that stuff works. I think small 3-game series, we don't need to be exactly pinpoint perfect, but I think it could be enough, of a thing where even these losing team players outscore some of the winning teams from the other games, just because maybe it's a little bit close on a bad map. So that will be it for me today before I completely lose my voice. Just figured I'd mention that as well for you guys. But yeah, I'll see you guys all again next week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If there's anything I missed or skipped, always leave a comment, message me on Twitter. I'll be happy to help. But that'll be it from me tonight. I'll see you guys all again next week.